There is a lot to delve into here. David King is in place. Hello to you, Kingy.
Morning, G. How are you?
Aren't there some storylines here to work through?
Oh, don't we love the finals? It just goes up another gear, doesn't it?
It does. All right, so King's Gambit. I just want to break with convention here. I want to go back to the King's Gambit of round 13. So this is June 11, coming out of the King's birthday weekend, specific to Sydney overrunning Geelong at the SCG and what the power to score looks like as a defining proposition this year. That feels prophetic. It feels like round 13 materialised in the first round of the finals.
Yeah, it did. This was when I sent my notes through to you. Look, the Swans kicked 7 goals, 27-minute mark, third quarter to late in the last. And we all saw it happening in real time. Warner going crazy, Heaney doing his thing. Papley was involved in everything, forward of centre. And it looked like the Giants were trying to save the game. You can't save the game. You can't defend your way to victory. Nothing's changed since that point. We've spoken about that. And then you look at the 4 results on the weekend. The Hawks go whack 4 minutes into the second quarter to 15 minutes into the third. They kick 8 goals. And it's Newcombe and Sicily. Game over. The game's done. Brisbane go 8 goals, 18-minute mark first quarter to 16 minutes second quarter. Game over. Mostly on turnover, but Zorko was a major part of that. And then the interceptors who just did their thing behind the ball. The Swans, which we just touched on, Geelong, 11 goals in that second half. But in the first 20 minutes, they kicked 3 goals, 5. It should have been over 20 minutes in. And they missed a lot of easy opportunities. It really should have been done. And it was Danger going crazy at clearance. And Holmes, and I think Close is a player we don't talk enough about, his function and his role in that team. But Holmes and Close got them on the outside. Stengel probably cashed in, and a couple of the other small forwards probably cashed in terms of Manor and those guys as the game sort of went on. But that first 20 minutes, it just said, "Woof, gee, there's trouble here." And it just shows you that if you've got that power to score, it can come in a heartbeat. And this is why we talk so much about the star factor players, and we'll get to them in a moment. But we talked about Danger all week. We've talked about Heaney all year. We've talked about Warner all year. We've talked about Newcombe, and I think we've got to start to talk about Newcombe in a different bracket now. We touched on his clearance stuff last Wednesday night on 360.
You said he was Bontempelli in a different jumper.
Well, if you go back and watch that game again, and I'll touch on it, we'll go through the game specifically in a moment, but if you watch it again and just take any conceived ideas about where this guy sits and how he come into the competition, I can mount a case that instead of being a mid-year, a sup-list type player, if you like, and add onto your list, if he was taken pick 5 in the draft, you would have a different perception of him, and it would match reality now. I think he's a star, this guy, and we'll get to that in a moment. So those guys are the ones that get the momentum started for you. But you've got to get it on the scoreboard. And that's why I'm really excited about the last 3 weeks of this final series, because we are going to see some scoring. Because if you can't match the Hawks with their brilliance, you're in trouble. Brisbane just go bang, bang in a heartbeat. You don't know what's going on. The Swans, even when they've lost control of a game, you're still thinking, are they? They've started slowly so many times this year and found their way back into the game in a 10-minute window, usually before half-time. So, I didn't know Geelong could do that. I thought, they might be able to grind themselves to victory the other night and really challenge Port to be nervous or not. They didn't do that at all. They just went whack. So it's terrific for us as footy fans, but these teams now, I think they understand that the congestion and that really boring brands of football that we've seen, for 5 of the last 10 years, they've probably gone the last 2 to 3, is just a thing of the past now. You've got to engage in offense.
The power to score, the defining quality in the King's Gambit. So the big issue was the pinnacle moment for footy in the Harbour City. What the Swans did, what the Giants did for 3 quarters, what that might look like again should they come together in a grand final. It was the match of the weekend.
Yeah, so we went back last week and didn't really present this anywhere last week. It was just more for our own mind coming in. So look at the finals of the last 5 years. So just before we get specifically into this game, what wins finals? Is it actually winning contest and clearance, or is it winning the outside game, or is it a mix of both? What is it? So if you just track those years individually, so winning head-to-head clearance battles last year in the final series won you 50% of finals. The year before, 30%. The year before that, 63%. So it's not absolute that you win clearance, you dominate territory and you win games. You win contested possessions, 50%, 56% the last 2 years. So that's not really the absolute reason either. If the game's still 50-50 and you're winning clearance and you're winning contest, like what does that tell you? It probably tells you that what you can do on the outside once you've got possession of the ball becomes critical. So effective kicking, last year, if you won that head-to-head, you won 100% of their finals. 66 the year before that, 90 or 89% the year in 2021, and then 66 and 66 the previous 2 years. So it's how effective you can be on the outside. Now that's a simplistic thing to say, right? But if you've got the ability to get someone into space, how you do it is they'll do it in different ways. The Dogs couldn't do it all night. They couldn't do it all night. And I think that, when I look at the Sydney and GWS games, which is where we're going to start, the first 3 quarters, they smashed them, GWS, for clearance and contest, but they couldn't get it on the scoreboard. And they couldn't find their main man. And I, as much as you want to talk about the breaking down of the game and all that sort of stuff, which we will try and do, if they had the 2023 version of Toby Green instead of the 2024 version, they win this game by 5 goals. They were just crying out for one man in the forward half to light up. Hogan was trying and he kicked a few goals and all that sort of stuff, but they just didn't have him. And maybe go and have a look at Toby. I'm not critical of Toby because you can see that he's invested. You can see that he wants to be that guy. He wants to be the leader, but it's not happening. And his numbers this year, I think, have been distorted by games against the lesser teams. So if you look at his rating at GWS, he's their 6th rated player against top 10, against bottom 10 teams. He's their 17th rated player against top 8 teams. So he's not the same player against the best. And when he's got a good head-to-head matchup, and his score involvements go from 7.7 down to 5.6. Now, it doesn't read like a lot, but those missing scores, those missing opportunities are exactly what we're talking about in the final series. Only needed 10 minutes out of him on the weekend, and he just couldn't do it. He couldn't finish a couple of times in front of goal at critical moments to give them that surge on the scoreboard. So they just need one more forward of centre, and it has to be Toby. So for me, nothing will probably change next week unless Toby can correct, because the rest is in reasonable order. Their clearance game for the first 3 quarters was brilliant, and they should have been 6 goals in front, but they weren't because of that one player forward of the ball.
So how did Sydney win it?
Oh, well, they got their stoppage game rolling, and they were able to get speed on the ball, and this is what we're talking about. So getting to the outside to become effective with the ball, to become damaging with the ball, to get the game into clear air. So the first 3 quarters, so exiting stoppage by hand is a big part of that. So if you can chain out with handball and break the shackles, then you can go. And so the first 3 quarters, the Swans only had 7 stoppages where they exited by hand because the pressure was so good from GWS, and it was surge kick, hack kick, ugly play, right? Not very beneficial. In the 4th quarter, they had 8 alone. So 7 in 3 quarters, 8 in a quarter. So it was out and it was high speed straight away. And that's a disaster if you're a GWS defender behind the ball, trying to pick which way they're going to go. There was a few plays there where I tell you, if you watch this game back again and just watch Heaney, you'll be blown away. I challenge people. We didn't do first crack last night, right? So I challenge people to watch this game again. Watch the last quarter again. If you want to watch how the best do it and why they are the best, I want you to watch these time codes, Gerard, because he gave them 3 warnings before he kicked the big goal.
Yep.
3 warnings. With 14:39 on the clock, Tom Green got a warning. He just let him go. He let him go, and Ash failed to go with Lloyd, and Lloyd carried the ball the whole way and kicked the goal. But 15 metres to the inside, tracking that corridor run is Heaney. Now, if you're Tom Green, you'll go, oh, gee whiz, I got away with one there. Even though we conceded a goal, personally, I got away with one. Then you look at the next opportunity. So the second warning, so that was 14:39 was the first. 13:43 was the next. It was Tom Green again. If you pause it at 14:35, he's there for the handball just as he's entering inside 50, and they couldn't quite get it to him. and he has 2 or 3 opportunities in that next 3 to 4 seconds to get the ball. Didn't work out for him. I'm thinking, mate, you have got away with 2. We're watching this live thinking, this is going to happen. It's a matter of time. So I'm looking at the GWS coach's box, and I'm going, what are you seeing? How, this guy is going to hit the scoreboard, make the change, do something now to make the change. And we've heard Geno talk about the Pareto principle for years. 80% of your damage comes from 20% of your players. Lock this guy away now because he's going to take the game away from you. He got trapped on the bench for a few minutes after that. And then the third warning shot come 6:34, a stoppage at half-back. Canelio didn't want him. He didn't want him. He just didn't want the task. And he handed over to Callaghan, who failed to see it through. And if you pause it again at 6:23, you got an easy handball in the corridor, which was just missed. They tried to get the ball to him. If you pause it again at 6:16, they just missed him with a handball inside forward 50. And then the front and square crumb, it wasn't given by McDonald. He took the snap. But that's 3 shots across the bow. And then the ultimate failure came when the game was absolutely there, 6 points down. And we've all seen that goal. But if you watch that play in isolation, you've got Heaney on Whitfield, disaster. You've got Sam Taylor, the next man back, effectively on Papley, and then Iden out the back. That's a disaster. Iden should be on Papley and Taylor should be the last man in the chain, out the back. That's his role. So they all get it wrong. And the critical 2 to 3 seconds are when Heaney surge runs and goes from behind Whitfield to level with him and then puts the great arm bar on him just before taking possession. It's just beautiful to watch.
That's the bit that gets me.
Yeah.
Is he opens his space with the arm bar as the ball's on its way to him.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome play. And I think if you want to see why they're the best, that's the vision for me from the weekend that just says, wow, what sort of season has this guy had? And everyone that I spoke to on the weekend said, this guy's the best player in the comp. I don't know, he might not win the Brownlow and he may not get the credibility or the credits that he deserves in Melbourne, which I don't believe. I think most of us are talking about him, but they feel aggrieved, the Swan supporters, more often than not. And they wanted to push the case for him. And when I watched that and I say, this guy changed the course of this game. Warner at stoppage was very good, but this guy was the one on the outside. And GWS, and they'll probably wrap around, in my opinion, and get another opportunity in a grand final. And there is no way that this will be the case. And this is full club, this stuff. They rested him in round 24, right? He was the only one that could gut run like that at the end. It was quite remarkable to see what he was able to do. And I just think the club has got more things right in the last 3 to 4 weeks than wrong.
The best bit of the opening round of the finals was Isaac Heaney. What happens if they meet again? What are the unresolved issues? Start with the Giants and Stephen Canelio.
They've got a big discussion to have there, I think. I've watched him closely the last 2 weeks in Ballarat and obviously on the weekend. And he's clearly playing impacted with that shoulder. And that's honourable that he's playing this way, but they need to have a chat. You can't be front line in at centre bounce clearance if he's not prepared to put his body on the line. 4 contested possessions on the weekend, but he was almost avoiding contact. And I'm not sure that is going to pay the bills the closer we get to the big one. And we always talk about preliminary final integrity from the start of the season to the end. You can't carry that type of action, that type of protection mechanism into a big final as a clearance player, as a midfielder. So I'm not necessarily saying you can't play him, but you can't play him, you at minimum can't play him in that role. So they've got a tough conversation to have with him. Mate, can you do this or not? And if he says yes, you say, well, you've got to do it because we've got other players that can go and play that role. So they're stacked for talent, but he needs to deliver upon that. And he didn't on the weekend, and he probably didn't the week before. But he gets away with it with some of his, his numbers and his kicking, and he's still massages a reasonable game. But when you absolutely have to have it, will he do it? So I think there's a big conversation there for the coach to have with the player, Stephen Canelio.
And have you got a structural question that sits over the Swans?
We've talked about them all year, the tall forwards, and they never looked more impotent than they did on the weekend. Like Amadi couldn't draw you one. For 120 minutes, he didn't know where it was going. Or he couldn't beat. He's not the only player to not beat Taylor, and maybe his role was to take him out of the way a little bit. But he could have been 3'6" rather than 6'6" to kick that last goal. Papley did all the heavy lifting for him. McDonald, he did some things that really hurt the team on the weekend. The non-give when the game was hot in the last quarter, where he picked it up and snapped it. He had two Swans teammates in front of him just saying, "Give us the ball and we'll tap it through." He didn't give it. He went lunge with one hand a couple of times. It were costly turnovers. He had some very errant, some ordinary kicking. So it just makes me wonder. He absolutely, I know you've come a long way with this structure. Are you rusted on that this is how it should look? Are you one tall, too heavy in the forward line? And it's one of those things that John will say, no, this is what we do, and I understand that. But gee, it's a worry, Gerard. The last point, can we mention Tom Papley?
Yes.
Because to come back into this team and do what he did in the last quarter is quite amazing, really, isn't it? And he was involved in 4 goals in that last quarter. He handballed the ball to Amadi, he handballed to Hayward, he handballed to Heaney, and he kicked the bomb from 50 and went crazy and got them going. What a player. I fancy bringing that sort of player back into your lineup. You just need a lot of luck in footy, and to get him to the line and in that form and with that energy. And McInerney did some things which was terrific through the course of the day. The off-field at Sydney has enabled them to find a way to get over the line. If he's 1 week late and Papley's not there, they're not winning that game. Simple as that.
Yep. All right. That's the Battle of the Bridge, the Sydney Derby, the qualifying final. Let's go to the events of Friday night. So we first put Hawthorn in preliminary final integrity when they were sitting in 13th place in June. And now we're about to find out if they've got PFI.
Yeah, I want to start with John Newcombe because coming into this game, and he's played some pretty good footy over the last couple of years, so he's no slouch, right? But what level of player is he was probably my question coming in. And do Hawthorn absolutely have the man? Because you need the man at some stage to just take control of your on-field performances. From the 5-minute mark of the second quarter to 5 minutes into the last, so an hour of footy, an hour of game time, he had 23 disposals, which was 9 more than anyone else on the ground, including 8 score involvements. He took total control of the game. And I just wonder if we're not recognising what this guy's doing. Is he slipping through the cracks? We talk about the elite players. No one mentions him. He's never in the top 10 midfielders discussed. Do we find reasons to leave him out? I'm not sure why. And I'm part of that discussion as well. So I think we've got to address what we have here, because there are some players I like to call them when you have to have it players. When the game has to be decided, is he now in that bracket? And I sort of think he is. I mean, you were there, you saw it. What did you see?
It was defining.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. So that performance helps redefine him. So for the body of work that he's put together, this is what September's for, isn't it? Okay, so he's the separating figure across 1 hour of a final, and we all saw it.
So it's important to say at the start of that 1 hour, they were 2 goals down. Like, the Dogs weren't hopeless. Everyone's talking about the Dogs like they didn't turn up, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. They were made to look ordinary for a large chunk of that game by a pretty good team. And this guy, Newcombe, was a major part of that. So he did it when they needed it to happen. So I really thought that was significant. There's a couple other talking points from this game. Meek versus English, you have to talk about. I mean, you have to, again, dip your lid to the off-field to get this guy to your football club, Lloyd Meek. And what he was able to do in the ruck, it was men versus boys there for a while. Like, Tim English as a ruckman is a non-event, an absolute non-event. And he's going to be there for a long time, and I don't know how you massage around that, because he just gets mauled. And I know the Dogs, we talked about the strip club, because they have to take the ball back off the opposition all the time, because they know that the opposition ruckman's going to win the tap. And it's going to go the Hawks, so they have to be there to rip it out of their hands or disrupt or defend from the moment it's tapped. They are defending. So I don't know if you can live like that in finals now or in big games now. It's just such a tough way to be. And when I looked at those two boys in the ruck, the 36 to 27 were the first possession. So that's +9. That's a massive advantage. It just means you can be proactive. So whilst it's only 9, they're on the move. They're in flight. And that's what we showed last Wednesday. If you can take the ball in flight, you clear traffic pretty quick. And then it becomes about damage. It becomes about, your outside players. Then they perform their function. Everything seems to work. You're purpose-picking players for roles. Everything works when you get into clear air. And I don't know how many times, right, on first crack that I've shown the hit out with 5 minutes to go, boundary throw in, second quarter, Meek, nice little tap to Newcomb on the fly from boundary side, straight through, snap goal. I don't know how many times I've shown that this year. I reckon we've shown that 4 times. So for Adam Treloar to not be ready for that is lost in the preparation, whether that's him or the coach, or you can put it down, just a defensive lap. No, this is finals. This is what we're talking about. So, I just wondered why that was the case. And the Dogs' handball game at clearance, while we're staying in the clearance, their handball game at clearance was a non-event. I think they got 2 scores from those exits by hands from stoppage this weekend, which was their poorest performance for the year. So if it's not Bont, it's no one. He had a remarkably quiet game for him. He set such a bar. We can't be critical of him to have an off day. It was a bad day to have an off day, but when it wasn't him, who was it? And the answer was obvious. It was no one.
What Hawthorn got from their 2 first-year forwards, Cal Shadir and Nick Watson.
Wow.
First-year players, not just first finals appearance, first-year players.
Yeah, it was amazing. So I looked at Cal Shadir. So he took 5 marks inside 50, right? I thought, that's a lot. That 5 marks. I thought, that's some pretty good players, the Hawks, over the last sort of 15 years. I wonder where that sits in a final, 5 marks inside 50. So I had to look back and I start going back, and then I start going back, and I start going back further and further. They've played in 25 finals since 2008, and there's only been 1 final in that period where players have taken more than 5 marks inside 50. Jared Ruffhead and Lance Franklin did it in the same game. They took 6 marks inside 50 each in a final in 08 against the Dogs, ironically.
Right.
But that's how far back you have to go.
Yeah.
So 16 years of footy, 25 finals, the last time since someone's taken 5 marks inside 50 for the Hawks. He was terrific. And he's just getting better as he's getting more confident. And how they've developed this guy and how they've nurtured him, and the excitement that's happening around him is taking him and them on this ride that's amazing. But no, he was terrific, Jared. The other thing to talk about is Sicily. And I can understand not picking Riley West. You don't have to pick who, the coaches earn and own the right to pick who they want to pick on any given game. So to not play him's fine, but they didn't really replace the function. So his role is to diffuse the intercept marker. They didn't replace that role. Like, I looked at Sicily and it was McNeil early, which was an error. Then it was Gallagher, and that was a non-event. There was second quarter, 13:06. Harms winning the ball from a clearance. He turns around, he drives it long. Gallagher's leading straight at him flat out. Now Sicily knows, mate, he's not kicking to you. So you can go as far. He runs as hard as he can for 30.
Yep.
Sicily just stands there, jogs back, takes a mark, third man in, away we go again. So if you put a player on him that he can disrespect, he will disrespect them in the right manner and at the right times. I thought it was really poor. And so for that to be the case, that does come down to selection and coaching. They allowed Sicily to be a factor, and they paid a heavy price. That's a decision that the Dogs coaching group would like over again. But to be blunt, it was their star factor players in the middle that got mauled, but the Sicily was a major factor.
So just on the PFI front with the Hawks, how bad a blow is the Sam Frost injury? Doesn't front up again? Because he's been so important for them. From the moment you were there when Blank got injured, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you think through what Frost has been able to do for them when they were short-suited, it just gives you an idea of how critical he's been to this rise.
Yeah, and it's that you don't get a run in there. You don't get a look at anyone else. It's just, hey, listen, we're into a semi. Can you go and do this role? Look, that's a tough ask for any player now to go back and do that. So you've got to lean on others. We can't concede 55 inside 50s this week because we know we've got a problem here. So how do we get around it? Well, we're going to have to go with an undersized player, and we may get outmarked 2 or 3 times, but we just got to saddle up and go again. That's just the bad luck, isn't it? But it's a blow. There's no doubt about that, and it'll become more of a blow as the finals roll on. Might not hurt them as much this week against Port Adelaide, but then you go to Sydney, and those tools that we talked about that haven't fired a blow, they get an opportunity against someone that's probably he's not. Not only is he not your first pick, he's probably not your second. He's probably your third.
Yep.
So you're starting to get deep on the roster now. So if you get a very, very good matchup that John Longmire would be saying, hey, this guy, regardless who he's talking to, he's not in your class.
Okay, so the Hawks' preliminary final integrity. The open question is the Dogs. Ollie went back through and kept our chart. The Dogs have been in every category of the means test. They're the only team that completed the bingo card. Everything from the big issue to PFI to the pressure index, got that right, wrong, the debate, the open question, best bit, worst bit, and curiosity. They have filled the bill across the year, which is sort of their tale, is they have been everything for worse and for better. They're living Groundhog season, not making the top 4. 5 out of 10 seasons go out in elimination final as a result. When they get through, they go to the grand final. So the open question is what becomes of the Bulldogs next? Will they be better next year? Are they going to live this season on repeat?
Well, I'm a believer, but I can understand others not being. But their bottom 6 players, they cost them games, Gerard. And their top liners didn't front on the weekend, but they've been so good for so long. It's hard to be critical of Bontempelli and Treloar and these guys for the weekend.
The idea that they have everything that they need is not right.
No, it's not.
Not when you see games like that and you realise that the tail is long.
Yeah. The tail is that. Yeah, exactly. They don't bat as deep as others. And I understand their top 4 or 5 are as good as any. But Sam Darcy's so young. Jamara is still very young. They're miles from the finished product. But I do get the narrative though. Like if you're going to make these, these calls on Riley West and that function and change going into a final series, you want a bloody good reason. A matter of fact, it's not that you want a good reason. It has to work. If you're going to make a drastic change like that, it has to work. Because when it fails big, you wear the heat. Bevo's a big boy. He's happy to wear this heat, right? But I do, and I've said this multiple times this year, and people don't like to hear, I do think they are regenerating on the run. They know that they don't bat as deep in them. I mean, how many youngsters have they got in the middle of the field? Not many. So they know they're having to do some things around that. But they've got warts. I mean, we're going to talk about Tim English as a ruckman for a long time now. So how do they handle that? They're almost better losing him. As silly as it sounds.
Yeah. They're on the clock in the Bontempelli years. I think that's what has it at the forefront of the minds, is they have what they regard as their best ever player.
Yeah.
They're on the clock in this time. So do they go into next season with Beveridge in the last year of his contract? How do you navigate that? It's the most awkward time, given that clubs have got a phobia now against sending a coach in the last year.
It's funny, isn't it? And I love working with Kane. And Kane's the most critical person on Luke Beveridge, I think, publicly that we've heard. This guy's won a grand final and been to a grand final in 2021. So if we're going to hold a standard as benchmarking coaching performance, he's been past that benchmark at minimum twice. If you want to just start with twice, minimum twice. There are others that haven't got past that standard, that benchmark, that don't get the same critique as Luke Beveridge gets. So I think if you're going to do one, do all. So he's a wonderful coach, Gerard. 2016, they won with a forward line that you wouldn't give 5 bob for, right? And then in 2021, they were stiff. They were a couple of goals up, and Melbourne went crazy. And all credit to them for a 15, 20-minute window, and it was over. That's still a bloody good effort, and I think they're regenerating on the run. They're trying to go past Libba and these guys, but they're not quite there yet. So does that have Bontempelli in it? I don't know. You can't guarantee players' success just because their star factor and and they're getting deep, you just keep rolling on. He'll be there, Jerry. You think otherwise?
No, I don't think otherwise. I think this is the trickiest scenario in modern footy to navigate, the last year of the contract, because it blows up if the slightest misstep at the start of next year creates its own energy. And that's why we saw Fremantle put an extra year in place. That's why Adelaide put 2 years in place. That's why Carlton put 3 years in place. And you can judge all of those as you go. But I did say on Crunch Time, if I was Don Pike, I would be in Luke Beveridge's lounge room on Wednesday.
Yeah, so you clearly think he can coach.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so
I've been a long-term
I guess
believer.
that's the discussion, isn't it? Yeah, so if we think he can coach and you're the Western Bulldogs, why would you let him leave?
So this is the question that it's an awkward off-season for them now, having gone out in an elimination final again.
But nothing happens conventional with Bevo. I can see him saying, I'm happy to go in last year under pressure because I like the pressure.
Yeah, but it's not just about him. It's about how the whole club and it's about how it infiltrates the walls.
Yeah.
And I think the two clearest examples in recent years have been Nathan Buckley at Collingwood and Leon Cameron at the Giants. And Leon was gone after about 8 weeks and Bucks made it to halfway. It is a difficult scenario to navigate. That's all I'm putting out there.
Yeah, I
open
like it.
Question.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right.
Can we just put this in one bracket for me? Carlton lost trust in any decision they made this week. They lost trust, and it was clear that they were forced into a corner at selection, and they probably had to pick this magnet over that magnet, even though that magnet had been okay. Doesn't have the cachet and the stripes of this one, so we're going with this one. And I just think Vossi thought, I'm going to bring these guys in. He can't run out of full. I'll make him the sub. I'll play him as the second ruck, even though I know he's not going to be able to do the second ruck job, and I'll see how it goes. And then 10 minutes into the second quarter, get him off. It's not going to work. I'm going to play this player in this role, even though he just didn't seem to trust anything. And the players, I think the players felt that, and it sort of seeped into their psychology, and they, in the end, couldn't do basic functions. They couldn't stop the Lions just chipping the ball around. So in the end, when you allow teams to chip the ball around, it'll end up with the star factor players because that's the aim of it. We talked about the Swans doing it to make sure that Warner and Heaney and Goulden end up with it. Well, Zorko kept ending up with the ball. And that first, I don't know, what do you call 20 minutes of footy, it was just evident they were off. They weren't really invested in any sort of plan. Maybe there was confusion about what that plan was. But I just think that it lacked cohesion because of so many changes. So everything broke down because of the lack of absolute trust that these guys will be able to get it done. We all knew they weren't going to be able to get it done. Even Carlton knew they weren't going to be able to get it done. So that's what it looks like. In the end, that's how it's played out.
It's a bad spot to get to, isn't it?
It is, but I can see how they got there, Jared. And I just think this has been... And people don't want to hear it. And I don't make excuses for clubs. I don't. We just talk about the facts. They've been unhealthy for 8 weeks. And in the end, this is where it brings you to. Picking players you really don't want to pick on the road against a team that you know you're not going to beat. And you make you just, in the end, the fog of trying to work through that from a mental point of view just catches up with you and it spirals out of control and your year fizzles really badly. And I feel for Vossi. Were they ever going to win it this year, given their health? Probably not. At stages this year, we thought they were the ones. Like what, round 8, 10? Ollie will have our comments from them, which will be disappointing to hear them back. But at that stage of the year, if they had held their health, then they may have been a chance to run at it. But it's just another blown year.
They sit second from round 13 through to round 19.
Yeah. Hanging on at round 9. I mean, that 4 to 5 weeks there, I still think you look at who's available, who's healthy, who's in the gamble on Curnow a few weeks back, the constant re-injury of players when they're in rehab, to not get a clear runner. You're talking about advantages. So you stand next to someone, you're at 90% game day, and you've missed blocks of footy, so you're not in form as such. You're not seeing the game. You stand next to a guy that's played 23 of 24 games. He's cherry ripe. He's going to beat you, Jared. The gaps in the competition are not that great. So I feel a bit for Vossi in saying that they've got some decisions to make. I think on some players. Zach Williams for me is an interesting one because he can be so good when they're playing well, but so bad when they're playing poorly. Can you continue on with that sort of player? I think Motlop's got some work to do. I'd look at the 15-minute mark of the first quarter. He totally switched. He's chasing Zorko, and then he just totally switches off after denying the first handball receive, and then he lets him just wrap around, take an uncontested mark. And I think, what's that? Is it fitness or is it attitude? I'm bashing him on that for a preseason. Mate, these are the things that kill us. It goes to Zorko, they switch the ball, they get a high quality inside 50. They're the little gaps that kill you. So I'm into those two players. I'm going to be into Elijah Hollands for you, how you turn up for preseason. Are you fit coming to preseason, or do we have to get you fit again? Which way is it? So there are little chinks in the armour at Carlton that need to be absolutely ironed out. They've got to go past some players that continue to let them down through a lack of availability, because it just kills them in season. They're better off not having them on the list. The Jack Martins or some of those key backs, some of the small backs. Can you actually play 25 games for the year for us? Because that's what we need.
The debate is Carlton for New Vision Clinics. New Vision Clinics, keyhole laser vision, next generation technology. Call 1-800-20-20-20. The curiosity is the Brisbane Lions, as we always say, win in the shortest possible time. Hey, won in the shortest possible time. So do you disregard the rest? How do you want to assess the Lions' performance?
No, you have to give them credit for what they've done. But as Dennis Pagan would say, I wouldn't be leaving any love bites in the mirror on this one, fellas. This was the clinical performance, and the opposition next week will be 3 times better than what you stepped up against on the weekend. It'll be on the road. It'll be a different story. So don't get too carried away with that performance. Celebrate it. Move on quickly. Put a full stop on it. They did as they pleased, really, but they were professional and they were clinical. I liked the way they approached it. They didn't try and, despite the fact that they won it in a short period of time, they were happy to play their game, chip the ball around, control the uncontested mark game, and then do your damage in the forward half. That's them at their best. They're hard to beat when they're in that sort of form. The Payne injury is a disaster, and I'm not sure the severity of that just yet. I haven't heard. I'm not sure whether you've heard, but
no. There was sort of the wave of optimism, but there's a grain of salt in the first day afterwards.
So Dara Joyce, to me, appears like a bit of a tweener. He's sort of stuck in between absolute AFL and high-level VFL. So he always worries me. But they're in good form. It's a great first weekend of the finals to have if you can get through playing that sort of footy. Everyone gets a little fill up, confidence is high, but it's going to be a different task this weekend as to last.
All right, so just the curiosity exactly what to take out of the Lions' performance, but they'll be on the road to Sydney.
Can we also bring in a taunting rule? I'm getting sick of seeing players having their head rubbed or pushed or they carry on after a free kick in the forward 50 or a mark inside the forward 50. It's a really ugly look for our game, isn't it? And the Brisbane do it more than most.
It was there right through. It was definitely in the Sydney Derby.
The Hawks aren't too bad at it either.
Which goes to our 2 categories here. They got that right, Geelong, and the pressure index, which is with Port Adelaide. That sort of one of those unvarnished moments where you get the truth.
You get the truth, and this is Port Adelaide, so it's a known product, right? So Geelong know this is a way to unlock some scoring here. And we've never talked about Geelong's midfield unlocking scoring. They've basically tried to hold fort in there and not have that be the reason they lose the game. They scored 75 points from stop, 75 points from clearances, right? That's their highest for 10 years, without the exception of 2 games against the Eagles, who've been nigh on uncompetitive in parts of that 10 years. So that's their 3rd best result in the last 240-odd games of footy. 240 in a final, Jared. 75. All I heard all week was Butters, Rosie, and Orm Francis, and Drew and Wines, and they kept naming them, So defensively, Port Adelaide have only had 1 poorer game, which was also in that period as well, that time period as well, which was also another final. the qualifying final last year versus Brisbane. So all things come home to roost at this stage of the year. So if you give luxuries, the opposition find ways, and with the 2 weeks planning, Chris Scott knows this is happening. So what do? We have spitters go through the stoppage. How many times did you see Myers or Dempsey or Manor going through the stoppage and just trying to create some chaos? And if you got it and were out and gone, terrific. Didn't happen that often that it was perfect and clean. Doesn't always work that way. But it created enough traffic and confusion with all these half forwards up and around the area that they got lost on the way through. And if they did happen to win it with the man who's still the king at clearance, they were all off and gone. And they were getting goal side of their men so easily, it was just ridiculous. So in terms of the effective clearance battle, 60% of Geelong's effective clearances become scores. Now, the AFL average is 30%. So in a final, to double the AFL average is enough for me. It just tells you what the method and what the planning was. The planning's not to maximise Geelong's strength. The planning is to rip apart Port Adelaide's floor, where their best magnets lie. That says enough, doesn't it?
Yes. It was just so ruthless. So how significantly do you revise Geelong in your estimations off the back of that?
38 scores in the final. 38 scores, Jared. I said on the weekend I can't remember 38 scores in the final, and someone sent me a message straight away saying it might happen against you guys with Essendon in 2000, where they scored about 45 times. But they're inside 50. You know, they were able to get the ball in and score so easily. I don't know. Geelong, I marvel at what they're able to do off the back of great leadership. We talk a lot about Dangerfield, but let's just leave him to the side for a moment. To see Max Holmes become this player, he played the most arrogant game of footy for the weekend, and I love footy arrogance. I do. I love it. When they take possession of the ball, he was able to put the game into speed on several occasions, and he got great penetration, and he made Butters chase. He made all of them. Butters was flagging there, trying to get to him at times. And I just thought this is exactly how you want the game to look. Mannor's become a seriously good AFL player in a short space of time in that forward line. And Close and Myers and Stengel, they play the same way every week. They are just there. We don't talk enough about Close. I think he had 11 score involvements on the weekend. I think Manor had 10 or 12. It might have even been more. So to get full total odds out of those guys, you have to set the game up a certain way. And that's what Chris does. And every week the opposition coaches know what's coming from Geelong, and they're having trouble stopping it.
And the pressure environment around Port Adelaide, it feels like Adelaide will be a pretty unhealthy town this week. That just leaving it on Thursday night and sort of feeling the mood and the way that it's a culmination of a few years now. They'll do really well to navigate that. Oh, I think it's a really unhealthy environment.
Yeah. I'll tell
the
you
whole
what.
thing. But if players aren't prepared to put their head over the ball and they're going to jump out of the way in finals, then that sits with them. And we've seen that a couple of times now.
Okay, well, any names there you want to reference?
No, I think you could go back. You could watch a preliminary final. You could watch a couple of qualifying finals and go, right, out. You're not wearing this jumper again.
Well, I like when you're in this mood. I'll tell you what, it was one of the biggest coaching cock-ups of the weekend was with 2 weeks of planning, you can leave a match committee meeting starting Jason Horne-Francis on the bench in the first quarter for 7 minutes of footy in a final where you've got to throw your best punches early. I'll give you home and away games. You do whatever you want in a home and away game, right? Because you've got to manage your list across the course of the season. So I don't care who starts on the bench in round 15, and I wouldn't even know who started on the bench in round 24. But if you've got 2 weeks of planning and you leave match committee with Horne-Francis on the bench, that's just wrong. Someone has to say, hey, guys, whoa, we're doing the wrong thing here. Hey, Ken, we're doing the wrong thing here. Can we just start him at full forward? Give the kid a chance to impact. He was the only one that was going to win him that game, Horne-Francis. If they do that this weekend, leave your swipe pass, leave your car keys, leave your club credit card on the desk and close the door on the way out. That you can't go into finals like that, Jared.
and what to do with the 6 remaining teams. Would have looked a bit different at three-quarter time at the SCG, where your seedings were then to where the seedings are now. Who do you want to put at 4?
The Western Bulldogs. No, only joking, Jerry. I'm going to put the Hawks at 4. I think they're going to be tough to beat this week. I think they'll get Port Adelaide this week. The week after is the one where I'm worried. In the back of my mind, I'm worried about, which probably gives away my number 1.
Yes,
so
yeah.
you can't. I think the Hawks are playing some pretty good footy, and off the back of Newcombe, I've got them at 4.
I think I'm going to have the Giants at 4.
4.
3?
Gee, you're a hard marker. 3, the Cats.
Snap.
Yeah. Are you better off having the best players in the comp with an average coach, or the best coach in the comp with a sprinkling of very good players? That's what they got, and this guy's going to try everything to get them there again, which is just bloody remarkable.
2?
GWS for me at 2. Although that was an awesome performance on the weekend, despite not winning. You don't always win these games. For 3 quarters, they were in total control, lost the handle. They'll take great learnings out of that, and I think they'll wrap back around and get there, Jared.
I've got Sydney at 2.
2.
You've got the Swans at 1.
I've got the Swans at 1. You don't play like that. You don't have dumb luck playing like that, Jared. Their star factor players know what's on offer, and they're charging towards it.
I've got Hawthorn at 1.
Still
Yep.
1.
Still right up there.
Love it. When did you
playing
put
their
them
best
1?
footy.
Do you remember? It was early.
They were 13th. I had them in the seedings.
I thought you'd taken up morning drinking the day you did that.